Hey guys, I thought I'd do a little quick broadcast for those of you out there that have taken up my invitation to join me on the early quest for our New Year's resolution completion by the first of the year. We start next week on Tuesday, October 2nd or 3rd, I believe it is. That'll give you 90 days to the end of the year, which means you will finish your goals on the new year and celebrate the new year in the win column. Today what I wanted to do, in addition to take a little break from my workout before I run home, getting it in where I can fit it in, guys. I want to share 3 stories centered around mice that I think do a great job of giving us insight into human potential, that is. And I like to use mice so people don't take the stories to be so personal, thin-skinned so many people are. HD! Hey man, I haven't seen you in forever. Your son's getting so big and doing a track thing like his daddy. That's awesome. Runs in the blood. Hey, back to my stories. Give you 3 stories. Hopefully each one of these stories will give you a subtle distinction into some of your own human potential, mindset, circumstances. Call these 3 different stories, 3 blind mice. So the first story, as it's told, is scientists put mice in a cage. And they put them in a cage with a metal bottom. And scientists, being crude, as they may seem to be sometime in the effort of science, they ran an electric shock through the bottom of the cage. So obviously the mice were shocked. So the mice, in an effort to escape the shock, started to climb up the side of the cage. And they would climb up the cage and get out. And then the scientists did something that transformed the experiment. They put a top on the cage. So they ran a shock through the bottom of the cage. The mice got shocked. They climbed up, but they couldn't get out. So they would stay there until they got too tired, go back down, get shocked, go back up. And they did this over and over again until they just gave up. They just stopped. They realized that the nature of their reality was that they could not escape the shock, and their life was just a life of shock. So they stood there and took the shock. They just stood there. They didn't get numb to the shock. They didn't get desensitized to the shock. They just accepted to just take the shock. But then the scientists removed the top from the cage, and the mice just stood there and took the shock. Then the scientists reached in, grabbed the mice, took them out of the cage so that they could see that there was no top to the cage, put them back into the cage, and the mice just stood there and took the shock. The mice had decided, they had learned to be helpless. Actually, learned helplessness is a psychological phenomenon that you can read up on. We all suffer some form of that. But they learned to be helpless in this scenario. And even when shown there was no top to the cage, their reality was such that they would live a life of shock. That's story number 1. But I encourage you to share this with somebody that you know is standing in a cage of life, getting shocked, and there is no top on their cage. Story number 2. Hopefully that didn't disconnect. My phone went off. I think I'm still broadcasting. Yeah. So story number 2. They put mice in a maze. They put mice in a maze, and they put cheese in a maze, and the mice, being rather intelligent, could find their way to the cheese. And obviously once they did that, as soon as you put them in the maze, they went straight to the cheese. So then the scientists removed the cheese, and the mice went to where the cheese was and immediately kept moving, kept searching for the cheese, searching all the way around the maze to find where the cheese was now placed. Makes a lot of sense. But when they did the same type of experiment with humans, the humans obviously learned how to find the cheese faster. They remembered it faster. They could go to the prize faster. I don't think it was cheese for humans, but they could go to the prize faster. But here's the difference. When they moved the prize and they put humans in the cage, the humans kept going to the place that it was, and they would go back to the beginning, go back to the place that it was, and they would sit there in the place that it was, angry, mad, because they knew that they were 100% right of where that prize was. They knew that they were right, and they stood there frustrated and pissed on. Their prize was gone. They were not to be found. So take that as insight, right? Take that as some insight into the human psyche. How many people do you know are in a room where the cheese has been moved, but they refuse to search for where the cheese actually is because they are just determined to be right? Third story. This is a little bit more graphic, but it's equally as powerful. Scientists put mice in a tank of water with a stopwatch to see how long mice could survive, treading water before they started to drown. And they timed it, and they got an average. They would let them literally sit there and tread water until they ran out of gas and started to drown. And what they realized is, so they would do that. They did that, and they got an average. So they knew kind of what time frame mice would bodies would start to give out. Mentally, they would start to get out, and they would just start going on their reach, and then they would save them. But here's the interesting thing about this story. When they took mice out just before they hit the period where they started to drown, let some time pass, and then they put those mice back in the tank and repeated the experiment. Those mice went way beyond what the line was. They went way beyond the time period where they started to go under. You know why? They had this thing called hope. The last time they were in this situation, something happened. They were saved. They were reached in. Something happened, and it changed their circumstances. And just that little bit of difference gave them more something, right? More energy, more perseverance, more determination. But it was a real demonstrable, quantifiable thing. They went way beyond what they were capable of doing before they were exposed to this idea of what we're going to call hope. So, 3 different stories of mice that I hope give you some insight into human nature in a way that you can reevaluate where you might be. Are you in a cage taking shots when there is no top to the freaking cage? Are you going to the same place over and over just for the sake of being right? Just because you know that's the way it should be and that's the way it was and blah, 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 but it's not there, but you don't care. You're starving and that's what you're going to do over and over just because you're right. And are you in a position where you understand the implication of this idea of hope, or have no hope and you're working well within the limits of your potential? You're giving up at the front line of where people start to give up. I call these 3 stories combined 3 blind mice because in each situation these mice were blind to the reality that existed beyond their current circumstance, beyond what they could physically see where they were. And I think we all are a little blind to some nature of our reality that actually is as real as the challenges that we see in front of our eyes, if we can get beyond the circumstances, if we can have a shift in mindset. 3 blind mice, my friends. If you know people that are in any of those circumstances, I dare you to share these stories with them. It might be that one little shift in mindset that makes them realize, hey, wait a minute, there's no top on this cage. And I don't have to take this shock. All right, guys, have a great day.